Everybody, Julie from Mountain View Wellness. Welcome to our last day of our whole health and fitness challenge. I'm very honored and very excited about having the opportunity to interview Sally Ann Anderson. She is a nature-based entrepreneur and pioneer. She wears many, many, many hats. But today we're talking to her because she is she's a trained Shinrin Yoku Forest Therapy guide.
Good morning. Thanks for having me, old Rafiki, old friend. So yeah, Shinrin Yoku Forest Therapy, what is it? Hopefully sometime soon, people won't have to ask that question because we do hope that it will become as commonplace as is yoga or meditation these days. So what is Shinrin Yoku Forest Therapy? Well, my elevator speech when people ask me that question, this sort of like 30-second, soundbite, I will often say to people, well, it's kind of like mindfulness in nature. But if we deconstruct that for a moment, it actually really isn't, because if you think about the word that we use so frequently, mindfulness, it's really kind of a silly word because, when we're practicing mindfulness, really what we're practicing is an intentionality of getting out of our minds and letting go
like
of some
awareness.
Exactly, but letting go of that sort of, getting off the hamster wheel, letting go of that monkey mind, that monkey brain that's constantly thinking about, generally speaking, the past or the present. Very rarely are we in the now. So Shinrin Yoku Forest Therapy originated in Japan. Shinrin Yoku, the direct translation into English from Japanese, is forest bathing, but that's kind of that sounds kind of funny in English. I most commonly refer to it as forest therapy. It's under a growing umbrella of ecotherapies, ways of being outside. And when you go on a Shinrin Yoku walk, your guide basically walks you through a standard sequence that includes all kinds of invitations to reconnect to your sensory self, your sensory body. If you think about it, Julie, people who, I'm in this beautiful forest right now. I'm sure at some point there's going to be somebody running by or somebody going by on their mountain bike. I certainly still do those things. If you think about it, though, we as a culture frequently are very in this place of like getting there, we got to get there, but we do not pause long enough to actually be here. So as a forest therapy guide, my job is to really help people slow down long enough to truly be in this place and to reconnect through their senses. And hopefully we'll talk more about this because there's a very common misconception that we are operating with only 5 senses, and that's not true. But I will offer a series of invitations that will help the participants to reconnect kind of to their animal body. And if you think about it too, if you look at any culture or any person from any walk of life, it doesn't take too many generations to trace back to all of us being land and earth-based people. So I believe strongly that we are wired to need nature. I believe nature needs us. I believe the forest that I'm sitting in is sentient, is a living entity beyond just all of the other than human creatures and plants and trees that are in this forest. And we have a symbiotic relationship. So through forest therapy, there's a recognition of that fact. And the forest therapist basically sort of opens the door through these invitations. And if the job is done well and the participants are in a place where, there's at least some level of openness to trying this out, the forest will 99.9% of the time deliver the medicine that particular person needs. So that's a starter glimpse, and I'll see what questions that raises for you, and we'll dig a little deeper.
I know we spoke earlier about the beginnings of Shinrin Yoku in Japan. And if you could speak to that a little bit, and I was super fascinated about the scientifically based,
Hmm.
benefits
Yep.
of being in the forest, in a
Sure.
particular kind of
So
forest.
Shinrin Yoku first developed in Japan because, as many people are probably aware, the Asian countries, particularly Japan, in terms of tech use and tech development, they were ahead of us, probably by a decade,
Mhm.
in terms of developing what has become very commonplace now. So late 80s, early 90s, they started to notice in Japan a major increase in all kinds of lifestyle illnesses. So, anxiety and stress disorders were up, obesity was up, hypertension, high blood pressure, was up. All of these things that we know, certainly with the work that you do, can oftentimes be managed through good lifestyle choices, diet,
Right.
exercise, mindfulness, that kind of stuff. So thankfully, the Japanese government had enough wisdom to kind of go, why is this? Oh, wait a second. We have really moved our lives indoors. And I have never visited Japan, so I'm not an expert. I just know from hearing from other people in my study. Um, but my understanding is something like 6/8 of the country is covered in forest. And even the term Shinrin Yoku, if you dig into sort of the meanings of the words, it goes back to there's a spiritual context for that title in and of itself. So the Japanese people, from what I have learned, have for a very long time connected to the forests and the natural areas. Just it was part of their cultural tapestry, if you will. It was something that was so woven into their way of being. And then suddenly, this tech age came and it hit their country before it hit us. And people were very disconnected from the natural world. They were very, very unwell. So the Japanese government, when they put that together and recognized that, they said, okay, well, let's take a look at this. In what ways can we help create, a connection again, a remembering of being and connected to the natural world? So they started studying it. Scientists were actually studying it, and a lot of information that in my world, because I run a forest school, I also do something called shamanic earth-based personal coaching and the Shinrin Yoku work. So I'm pretty familiar with the research, and there's more and more evidence that it's not just woo-woo stuff. We need the sunshine, we need the vitamin D, we need the vitamin N. And this forest that I'm sitting in right now, it's a ponderosa forest. I live in New Mexico. Ponderosa trees are pretty amazing. They smell like vanilla, FYI, really wonderful
Oh,
smell. Um, these are evergreens, pine trees, and what they found in Japan in particular, because many of their forests are also evergreen forests, is the scientists were able to measure that these lovely trees, um, all trees have benefits, but particularly the evergreens, the pine trees, emit something called phytonicides, which
mhm.
directly, if we are breathing that in, directly boosts our immunity and increases our natural killer cells. So they've been able to actually measure this. And at this point, what they found is even just 2 hours of, quote, bathing in the forest, which could be as simple as what I'm doing now. If I were to sit here for 2 hours, I don't even have to necessarily be moving my body, but I'm
Mhm.
breathing the air here. That
Mhm.
will confer benefits for over a week.
Or if I wanted to get outside more, but I can't go to a forest, if I can just go around my neighborhood, what are some things I could do to really, instead of putting on my, headphones or iPods or whatever the kids are calling them these days, and just walking mindlessly through my neighborhood, what could I do to actually be more quote unquote mindful or shift my awareness to
Sure.
my senses? And
Well,
even
I'm really
talking about
glad you're asking that question because Shinrin Yoku in theory doesn't have to be practiced at all in a forest. My mother, who is over 80, spends a lot of time repotting little plants. And
Mhm.
I would argue that she's getting a little bit of a Shinrin Yoku fix with that. So to answer your question, when when I offer a Shinrin Yoku walk and I have people with me, I often will tell them, don't expect a hike or a workout because we could, in theory, in 2 hours time, travel a quarter of a mile because it
Mhm.
is really about reconnecting to our senses and slowing down and noticing what we're noticing. We use a kind of scandalous word in forest therapy, and that word is reconnecting to our sensuality. And
Mhm.
our limited Puritan way of thinking of that word in our culture, our mind goes generally to like a sexual and intimacy space.
Mhm.
But if we are connecting to all of our senses through nature, and then become aware of what that is raising up inside of us,
Mhm.
it reminds us that we are sensual beings that feel and experience and sense the world in a number of ways beyond the five senses that we talk about. So to
Mhm.
go back to your question, you could take a walk around your neighborhood, and one thing I would suggest to slow you down would be to take your shoes off. Okay, take your
Mhm.
shoes off because that's going to force you to walk really slowly.
Yeah.
You might want to, choose your time of day because if the only option is sidewalk, it might get a little hot. I have my shoes off right now because whenever I sit in the forest, I'm always doing sort of an earthing, grounding thing. Um, but that would force you to kind of slow down. And I would start, for starters, I would start with your five senses. So I would stand like this place that I'm in, just looking around. I have the sun that's coming up obviously from the east and it's almost directly, across from me, and it is shining beautifully through the ponderosa canopy. Um, there is a blue sky up above. I woke up with lots of clouds this morning. We had some rain yesterday. That's all sort of burned off. The green of the trees against that blue sky is amazing. So just noticing what you're noticing. So starting, those are some examples with my sense of vision, um, my sense of hearing, your sense of hearing. Maybe close your eyes for a moment and tune into, what's the furthest away sound I can hear, what's the closest sound I can hear. um, are they, those sounds, whatever they might be, are they somehow in symphony together? Is there a conversation that's going on? Recognizing too, while we're doing this, that really in theory, everything is born from nature. So, sometimes I know for me, for years, I would go camping or I'd go hiking. And if there was car traffic noise or, someone on a dirt bike, I'd be like, they're ruining my,
Mhm.
no, in theory, really with Shinrin Yoku, because we're drawing attention to the senses, we also want to sort of welcome in whatever might be there, whatever might be present. Then we might move obviously to our sense of our tactile sense. So, maybe you're walking slowly through your neighborhood and you notice like, an amazing um, flower bush or something like that, go ahead and sort of reach out and touch that. Um, what does it feel like? Is it, if it's the morning time, is there dew on that plant? Is it damp? Is it dry? Is it soft? Is it prickly? Um, that example could very quickly move us to our sense of smell, and
Mhm.
smell is strongly connected to taste. Like I made mention early on as we started talking that these ponderosa trees, it's amazing, particularly when it's damp in the morning. Even from my home, it's the smell of baking cookies. It smells like vanilla or butterscotch. It's got a really wonderful smell. So this place has a smell, and arguably every place has a smell and maybe even a taste. So my sense of taste has not developed too strongly with my forest therapy yet, but there could be an invitation, depending on whether it's safe or not, to actually taste something. And with Shinrin Yoku, I should mention, part of the 6-month practicum and study is really getting to know the place that you live in,
Yeah.
because there's not much in my book that could be much better than this. But each walk culminates with tea in the forest. And I have harvested a plant or tree, pine needles, or whatever my place has to offer. I have harvested something along the walk, and I am actually making tea from that. So
Cool.
the walk finishes with all of us drinking tea together and literally taking in the forest. Um, so those are some starters for, even like if you're a gardener, for instance,
Oh,
how
that's
you can.
exactly where I was going. That's exactly, I mean, I just harvested a butt ton of basil this morning and I made a pesto. And then I
Mm.
also grabbed some beet leaves. And every time I have beets, I think of you, Sally. I don't know why.
Your first garden. Well, we got your first garden going together that long time ago in California.
That's right. You were the one that helped me with my first garden. And
Hmm.
now part of the Mountain View Wellness Network is homesteading.
That's
And
awesome.
a lot of our subscribers are gardeners who love to
That's so
talk
cool.
about all growing. Yeah. So we did canning. I've made kimchi. I'm harvesting lavender for a lavender lemon cake for Shayna's bat
Ooh,
mitzvah. Yeah.
that's
So I was
awesome.
just out there. Yeah, I was out there this morning, literally like noticing and becoming aware of everything growing. And I think during this growing season in Connecticut, in New England, wherever you are, it's so easy for me to be outside and to see things grow and to build that awareness of all of the senses, the smells, the
Yes.
sight, sounds of all the birds. And even, now we're able to taste parts of our forest, our ecosystem.
It's
It's
awesome. I would say, though, I mean, there's two other things I would want to add to that. The
yeah.
first is, yes, all of us, because we are animal humans, basically two-legged animals, we are a
Mhm.
part of this natural world. All of us, if we have a great degree of desire and intentionality, can
Mhm.
slow down enough to remember and to be in our physical bodies. We absolutely can. But we also live in a fast-paced world, a busy world. We live in a place in our heads where, as I've already mentioned, we are very rarely in the now. It's one of the reasons why I love working with young children, because they force you to be in the now. I love
Yeah.
it. We tend to be in our past or thinking about our future. So there is huge benefit to anyone increasing their outdoor time. But there is also huge benefit to, and I'd be happy to send you a link, actually going on a forest therapy walk with a certified
Absolutely.
guide, because
Hmm.
it would be the difference of, for me, I practice a little bit of yoga, but
Hmm.
I know that if I go to a yoga class, I get a lot more out of that yoga class, because the teacher, such as yourself, is a trained yoga instructor and has a much deeper knowledge than I
Hmm.
do about yoga. I by no means, that parallel's not exactly right, because I by no means want to suggest that I have a deeper knowledge of being connected to the natural world, because I believe we all are. But I have been equipped through my training with tools to basically offer these invitations that, we say, and I don't know if I've already mentioned this, but we say with Shinrin Yoku, with forest therapy, that the guide sort of opens the door and the forest delivers the medicine that the person needs. The forest is there to, give you the message, whatever that message might be. And that might be a very private message. Lots of times people, when they are on a Shinrin Yoku walk, will come into contact with their grief. It
Hmm.
just, for whatever reason, it kind of opens up. It's a bridge. Shinrin Yoku really is like a bridge between us as humans, and us sort of remembering that we're more than human and that we are connected to this world. So, definitely find a walk. Like I said, I will be offering some continued. I've been experimenting with this idea of virtual walks. I've done like 2 so
I
far, and
love
it's
the idea.
really interesting. I'll definitely make
Mhm.
sure you know when I do the next one, because I would love for you to join
I
and
will
experience it.
definitely let
And
our people know. Hmm.
yeah, and you can do that from your front stoop to, you can go. This forest that I'm in is like 3 miles from my home. We're essentially surrounded by this national forest. So I spend a lot of time out here. It could be in your garden, and the invitations are generally open enough to apply just about anywhere. The second thing I wanted to add, we did a really quick walk through the 5 senses, but
Yes.
I really want your listeners to remember and understand that there are far more than 5 senses. I
Mhm.
told you a story as we were getting on this morning. And I often will say to people, because it's something that people can quickly relate to, like, how do we know when someone is looking at us? We just know that because we are still animals in a sense. So, we talk about all of these different senses, and the 5 senses are the fancy word for the 5 senses are the X. Let me see if I got that. I actually wrote down the word because sometimes I fumble. Exteroceptive senses. So those are
Mhm.
the things that are really easy to kind of have contact with. But then we have proprioceptive senses, which is like a
We
felt
talk
body
about that.
sense.
Mhm.
In your work, I'm sure you do. So it's kind
Mhm.
of knowing where your body is in space. And, me being a special educator, like, that's a big deal for children who have special needs. We have interoceptive
Mhm.
senses, which is that idea of like, I'm hungry, or I need, such and such. My body needs these things. Those are all senses. In the
Mhm.
forest, we will often see something that's called a mirror sense. So, maybe I provide an invitation. It's an open-ended invitation, but you go off for your 15 minutes and you're doing this invitation, and something comes to you. Okay, I can give you a direct example. I took someone on a Shinrin Yoku walk the other day, and
Mhm.
part of the standard sequence, something that is always included in every single walk, is something that's called what's in motion. So we spend about 15 minutes just looking at what is in motion. Okay. And if
Mm.
our minds go to that monkey mind or hamster wheel, we will gently invite it back and we will just gaze at what's in motion. So
Mhm.
I gave this invitation out. And as I was in my practice of what's in motion, the only thing I could notice over and over and over again were all of these spider webs. Hi there, morning. All of these spider webs, and
Mhm.
it was like everywhere I turned, Julie, there were like spider webs. And suddenly, I realized that there's a particular situation in my life right now where I feel a little bit trapped in my own spider web, a spider web
Mm.
I have woven for myself, if that makes sense. So that was like an example of the mirror sense. Basically, the environment was mirroring something to me that was sort of floating in my subconscious, but needed to be kind of really brought up to my attention. Um, we all have an intuition. It's a misnomer that there are only certain people who are, I don't want to go down too much of a rabbit hole here, but that are clairvoyant or whatever. We all have intuitive abilities. It's just that we've sort of forgotten that we do. So that's another sense. There's a feeling in a heart sense, this idea of, one example of that is all of us, whether we're conscious of it or not, or most of us anyway, are probably able to read the sense of like a room. You could tell when the energy has gone kind of wonky,
Mhm.
or if there's a
Mhm.
heavy, that's another sense. And in Shinrin Yoku, we also talk about an imaginal sense that's a little bit like the spider web story that I just told. But we also talk about something called earth dreaming, which is a concept I am in love with. And it is this idea that Earth herself is sentient, and Earth knows what she needs, and Earth is dreaming up this little army of people. And you know, if you think about a dandelion, a dry dandelion, and you blow that dandelion, right, like, and all of those seeds go out, all of those seeds go out, but not all of them are planted. So this idea of like Earth dreaming is this sense of the universe, if you will, dreaming up through people like you who are, you know, committed to your work, and you are living out something that is needed very much in the world, this wholeness and wellness and what have you. For me, it's definitely serving as a bridge to helping people remember that they are, you know, sensual beings, that we are connected to this natural world. So I believe that Earth is dreaming this up through all of us and sort of sending out for dandelion seeds, and not all of those necessarily result in someone going, oh, wait a second, I feel led to do such and such, and actually doing it. But there are many of us, particularly at this point in time, who are beginning to wake up to kind of our greatest service, right? Our greatest service, like what it is that we can give back to the world. And you know, I believe when we answer that call, it really is a way of answering Earth dreaming through us, sending out those little dandelion seeds, and like kind of going, all right, it's planted, I'm doing it, I'm here and I'm doing it. So there's much more than the five senses, much more that, you know, in the unseen world, the unseen world that we are barely beginning to scratch the surface of. And that's part of the reason, going back to earlier in the conversation, because I'm sure we're probably getting close to wrapping up, but that idea of scientists actually studying, you know, the benefits of breathing in this air, and that we are far enough along that there can be like scientific tools to actually do that. Like, how amazing, because that is opening up this knowledge and this awareness that people, there is so much more going on than what is like just right there in front of you in your material world. So much more going on, so much more that could be tapped into, so much more magic. It's good, juicy, amazing stuff. So get outside, take your shoes off, breathe in the fresh air, and, you know, make time to reconnect. And this can be really hard. One of the edges that a lot of people come into contact with Shinrin Yoku is that idea of slowing down, because let's be truthful, oftentimes when we slow down, we also recognize what it is that we're running away from. And that's okay, you know, that's okay to just even just sort of sit with that. But you know, I get too that can be really a scary place for a lot of people. That can be an edge, but it can be worked through.
So people can do this today, and I love the idea that it's very manageable. It's bite-sized pieces. We don't have to go on, you know, a 2-hour trip, although I will definitely be going on your virtual Shinrin Yoku experience, because it sounds like an amazing experience to have. And I love your analogy of, you know, the difference between doing your own yoga at home and having a guide. I mean, you are the guide, you're inviting, you are in, it's an invitation to experience, you know, putting you in this direction with a lot of open-ended questions. I can't wait to experience it.
Yes. And it is, you know, one of the things that I frequently, I'll have people come on one walk, and one of the frequent challenges that I will sometimes have is explaining to people why it might even be worthwhile to come back several times. But you know, if you think about the natural world, it's never the same. It's always in flux. It's always in motion. We know that from just, you know, experiencing the seasons. So because of that, every walk in theory is going to be different. So yes, I mean, I will provide you with some links. I hope people will actually try out an actual
Yes.
guided walk. Um,
Mhm.
but a great place to start is those things that I talked about. And another, two other little tidbits is doing some grounding, like getting your shoes off, even if it's in your own backyard. Science is
Mhm.
proving now that our feet have, well, you're a reflexologist, you probably know,
Yeah,
but
and
it's
they've all
something like
experienced some
7,000
self-reflexology.
receptors, 7,000.
7,200. Mm.
There you go, more than what's in our hands. So,
Mhm.
if you think about it, it's interesting that we don't really experience things with our feet anymore.
Right.
So getting your feet onto the ground is a really amazing thing to do. And, there's a whole school of thought called grounding and earthing,
Mhm.
again, that science is now measuring, that
Right.
we quite easily receive the electrons from the earth through our
Mhm.
feet. So
Mhm.
they're starting to connect this to all kinds of health benefits, all kinds of health
Mhm.
benefits. I do it as frequently as I can because as I'm passing through menopause, I definitely have challenges with hormonal stuff and sleep. And I tend to be a natural girl. I want to deal with it naturally. So it definitely
Mhm.
helps me, a lot. And then the other practice that is a Shinrin Yoku practice that I mentioned really briefly that everyone can do, and that is part of my meditation arsenal now, because I don't know about you, Julie, but
Mhm.
sometimes for me to be disciplined and to sit in meditation, it's hard. I fight with my body being still. I fight with my
Right.
mind. I've met so many people who say, I can't meditate. I can't meditate. I think there's a common misconception of what meditation is. Like the Dalai Lama himself has even said, oh, yeah, like I barely go 30 seconds without a thought popping up. The practice is really recognizing everything that's popping up and then just sort of just recognizing it and letting it go, and frequently
Mhm.
doing that over and over again. But sometimes I'm not in
Right.
the right mindset. I'm not in the right mindset. So what I will do is I'll get my tea in the morning and I will go outside for 10 or 15 minutes and I will simply in my yard watch what's in motion. And if I
Mhm.
find myself going to that place of like, oh, I got to get this done today, I got to do this, I will just say, okay, mind, you know, just 10 minutes. And I will go back to whatever is in motion, whether it's leaves on a tree, ants on the ground. And I find it quickly drops me into my body and
Yeah.
quickly calms me. And it basically serves the same purpose of meditation
Mhm.
because, to go back to the beginning of the conversation again, mindfulness really,
Mhm.
in my way of thinking, is we want to get away from mindfulness and we want to move more towards mindlessness, like getting rid of what's in our brain all the time, just putting
Right.
it on
Just not
pause for a
living.
few minutes, putting it on
Right.
pause for a few minutes and just saying, okay, I know, monkey brain, that you're there. I know all of these things I need to do. I know all these things I need to worry about. I know all of this. But for my mental health and my well being and my physical health, I'm going to detach from that a little bit and just be back in my body and
Yeah.
ground myself, you know, and then I'll get back to that later on. So, those would be two other tips for your listeners. Take your shoes off and just watch what's in motion, and then go find yourself a Shinrin Yoku Forest Therapy guide.
Yay.
Ready.
So Sally, I will post all of your information at the end of this,
Perfect.
video. So we know how to reach you, and I'll make sure that I blast out the link to your Shinrin Yoku virtual walk. Well, thank you very much. This has been lovely,
Awesome.
very informative,
Awesome.
and it really it blends so wonderfully with all of the things that we have talked about: meditation, mindful eating, our meditation classes, the reflexology, yeah, and the feet. Just getting out of here and getting more aware
Yes.
without judgment, with compassion, with love, with curiosity and
And back
interest.
into our
So,
bodies, back into our
mhm,
bodies. We have these vessels that we live in. So, being mindful of that. Absolutely. And
and in
next
them,
year,
not
Costa Rica, baby, is going to be a yes for me next year. So
okay.
make sure you
We will.
ask me again.
But back to that, I mean, getting into the body, which I love, versus many a lot of people are more outward looking at their body, more mirror, like this is what it looks like on the exterior. And oftentimes that brings up such judgment and negativity that getting in is just, you're able to shine. I love,
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
love
And
it.
I mean, our bodies are homes. So whether, you know, sometimes we don't treat our homes so well, right? There needs to be a tidy up, and there needs to be a remodel and all of these things. I get that. But at the end of the day, I mean, these are the bodies we've been gifted with. And I definitely know from my own personal experience that the more grounded and embodied we are, the more we definitely do shine, and we're able to, like, provide whatever it is, our, God given, universe given, whatever our magic is. We need both. It's to me, my way of thinking with Shinrin Yoku and my shamanic coaching training is like, human beings are like earth and sky people. If you think about it, we're the only living entities that sort of walk the middle ground of both of those things. So we can be up here too much and out here too much and in the sky too much, or we could arguably kind of be in our bodies and, too obsessed there. So it's sort of finding a balance between the two, if that makes sense. And I definitely think becoming more mindful and more conscious of our practices helps us shine.
Absolutely. All right, Sally Ann Anderson, great friend from, and I didn't even explain this at the beginning, great friend from California and fellow returned Peace Corps volunteer in Kenya. Awesome.
That is
Thank
right.
you so much
We
for your
go back
time.
pretty far. You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me. I enjoyed it.
It's been a while. All right, cool. Looking forward to maybe some Costa Rica time with you.
I
I'm
know.
definitely working on another retreat, so
My dear, have a good
thank
rest of the
you so
day.
much. I will.
Let me know when you get this all launched.
I will. I'll send you a link.
All right. Ciao for now.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.